Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the special Tesla Roadster podcast. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner, and happy anniversary. It's been a year.
It's been a year, really?
We had our first Tesla Roadster Roundtable podcast a year ago this week.
Wow, I did not know that. Well, yes, we should get some cake, have a party or something.
Yeah, we should do something. Yeah. We should do something. I know, I kind of sprung that one on you. I was looking this morning at our podcast and happened to go back because I saw what the original directory name was. I'm like, holy cow, has it been a year already? And it has been a year.
You know, it's all experimentation. I mean, we had a table. I think it was different than this. It was that long table.
Yeah.
We had different microphones. We had very little equipment back there in the studio, but we were convinced that social media is a place that we should become involved in or with. And since we're in the Roadster business, we thought, you know, what a great way to unite the community and, even Tesla into this community of unique, iconic cars. And it's been a year. Is that right?
It's been a year. I part of what blows me away is, I had come in and had taken the spot that Zane had. And that was before we started the Roadster podcast. So I've been here over a year now in this spot. And I'm like, wow, the time has sure gone by fast. So we've got lots of good things for you today.
So bring a trailer was one of the first things that I wanted to talk about is...
Pete, real quick. I'm going to step out for a second. Do you need an image right now?
Yes, we do. If you could bring up image VIN 1419. And this is a Tesla Roadster, Twilight Blue, that is currently being sold on Bring a Trailer, BAT. And it's a 2011. What I did this morning was, actually, one of the other commentators on their Car Metallock said, why don't we promote this car? Because the sales on Bring a Trailer have not been stellar.
That's true.
I think the low point was a month or so ago. One only reached 69,450. And it had a reserve of $60,000 on it, which apparently Bring a Trailer would not let the seller raise. Now, the problem with that is if it meets the reserve and it's still low, then you have to make up the difference and buy the car back, basically, if you don't like the sell price.
Yeah, so you end up paying their full auction fee and everything else.
Mm-hmm. It turns out this particular car now is for sale again for $75,000, so somehow it was retrieved by the seller. But the point here being is the auctions right now are none too kind to Tesla Roadsters because of the law of supply and demand. There's way more supply than there is demand, and auctions run 7 days. And if it doesn't meet a certain level of visibility, negotiation, timeliness and all that, you may end up with a price that you're not happy with for your Tesla Roadster. And of course, this is usually where I plug our free Tesla Roadster matchmaking site, which is a far more gentle sale. The listings are out there until they're sold, and you get to talk to the sellers directly. We step out of the equation. We're the Tinder of the Roadster world.
That's right. We sure are in that case. And it's not so much that you're trying to get the hundreds and thousands of views that Bring a Trailer may be able to get. All you need is one person to buy. Mm-hmm. And we have a list of, what is it now, 400,
close to 450 pre-qualified Roadster buyers.
Okay, so we've got people that are coming to us saying, I would like to buy a Roadster someday. Mm-hmm. Put me on the list. And so we send out the listings out whenever we get a new Roadster in, and that goes in about a day or so before we post on social media.
Exactly, yes. So in this particular case, I agreed with the previous comment, which was, let's help promote this car. This is a great 2011. It's got 19,000 miles on it. It's got a Visium top, which is that clear Lexan top that doesn't cover up the carbon fiber in the back. And it's a black on black, which, some people really appreciate and like. So I posted on Bring a Trailer. I said, look, I'm in agreement. Let's promote this car. And by the way, if you're interested, we'll talk about it during the podcast at 11 o'clock today, because it would still be in play at that point. Well, they took that posting down because I provided a link to our
yeah, okay.
site. So I reposted without giving a link, and I'm assuming that people watching this are going to understand what where to go to see this car.
I certainly hope so. It is it's possibly my second most favorite car. My favorite one is the Twilight Blue. This is black on black. I love the Twilight Blue with the black wheels. These are gorgeous cars, though, and they're selling for, I think, too low of a price.
Yeah, and this has a legacy battery pack. The CAC isn't bad. In fact, let me see if I can find that here for you. It's probably down in the notes somewhere. Not readily accessible. Sorry about that. The car's in Fresno, California, so you're looking at transport from Northern Cal. And again, it's a car that is going to finish bidding in about 3 hours, I believe. And we would like to see this car get visible and get another Roadster in the hands of a new owner. All right. We've got another item here, which is a posting on Facebook. Someone broke their key fob. Can we bring up that image, guys? And it's going to be fob, F-O-B. The key fobs, of course, get a lot of use. It's the only Tesla that actually has a key. The rest are all electronic fobs. And it's not unusual for them to eventually degrade to this level where you get a casing that actually cracks. And usually you would get 3 keys with your Roadster. You would get 2 primary and 1 valet key, which didn't have the buttons on it. The problem with this kind of issue is we have not been able to find the original key vendor. A couple, 3 years ago or so, we got close to having a solution when I contacted Matt Windle, who was the Lotus plant manager back in the day when they were making Roadsters in Hethel, UK. And we had a chat about, how hard it is to get parts. And he says, well, keys shouldn't be a problem. We still have keys in production for the, and I'll go on the Lotus assembly line and I'll see what's available for you guys. Well, he came back a couple weeks later and he said, it turns out that this was one of the items that Tesla decided to source themselves. We were not involved. We have no idea who they ended up using for the key fobs and the keys. So I went back to our supply chain expert at Tesla, and it looked like the original company may have gone under and nowhere to trace them or no one took over. So for now, at least, we have not solved this problem, and it certainly is an issue because these keys are going to continue to deteriorate. There are a number of solutions, of course. People get used keys. They may go to a locksmith. They may put the key fob portion that's broken off the key back together and then put that on a keychain and use a standard key without a fob on it to get in and out of their car. But it would certainly be nice to be able to recreate these keys because they're going to continue to deteriorate. So if any of you out there in the Roadster community have any kind of leads where the vendor, or if there is a vendor that could recreate these, we would certainly be interested in exploring that for the community. The problem with so many of these Roadster parts, if you go to a vendor and say, you know what, we've got a part here that needs to be recreated, not something you have in inventory because you were the original vendor and you've got new out of stock inventory you'd love to get rid of because it's been on the shelf for 15 years. We're talking about recreating a part. Small quantity purchases are ungodly expensive.
Yeah.
The mold for that little case, although it's tiny, would be part of the cost. And then, of course, the little board and the electronics in there. So it's not cheap or oftentimes economically feasible to recreate parts like this. And that's why finding an alternate solution would definitely be of value.
I wonder, just me speculating here, we have, of course, Chaz Leitner with our metal manufacturing unit. Would it be possible to make something metal to wrap around that, effectively replacing the plastic with a metal container?
You know, the immediate thought that jumped to mind there is this is a transceiver.
Oh,
And
that's the problem.
it's going to block the signal.
Yeah, metal will block the signal. Yeah.
You know, 3D printing is an option for the shell casing.
Sure.
But now you have a circuit board. And anyway, we put it out there to the community. This is one of the items that still does not have a good solid solution. Looks like we've got a TikTok comment from Greg's 50 Cars. He says, Google plug.vin.
And I have Googled plug.vin, and it looks like it's another EV auction site. We'll have to look up more information on that and get that information out to people.
Well, thank you, Greg's 50 Cars. So the picture behind us, we should probably talk about that. This is not AI generated. This is Pete Gruber generated. I went up on a scissor lift in our service center when a Cybertruck showed up last week, and decided to get a picture of this Cybertruck in amongst all of these Tesla Roadsters. And the owner of this truck wrapped his Cybertruck in what's called Laguna Blue. The reason that he got one so early was the instant they announced this, and it was in the evening at one point, he said he had 3 computers active, and he jumped on all 3 of them, placing his order, and apparently got in the front of the line for the Cybertruck.
Wow.
Now, of course, that was, when did they first take reservations? That was summer of last year?
Oh, no, it's been at least 2 years.
Wasn't it September 2019 or something?
Yeah, for the
Has it been that
Cybertruck?
long?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's years and years, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
wow.
been a long time.
So despite being at the front of the line, he ended up waiting because they had to produce the trucks, and that didn't happen until November of last year. Okay. But anyway, he is one of the first ones in town here. And if you want to see some of his story about his experiences with this truck, on our YouTube channel, there's a video, a podcast that we did with Dr. Jay Larson is the owner of this vehicle. And he gives us all the background, how he bought it, how long he waited, all of that was in there, and what it's like driving this thing. What he tells us is this truck is a celebrity. No matter where he goes, people are taking pictures with their cell phones, even while they're driving oftentimes, which makes it somewhat dangerous. He says you can't go to a restaurant without clearing out some of the staff that come out to take pictures of themselves with the Cybertruck. And he said he's never driven anything that is as popular as this.
That is something else.
Hey, Pete.
Yeah.
You drove it. What was your experience like?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, he actually said, you want to drive in? Of course, I said yes. And first thing he did was he lowered the truck. He says, whenever I get in and out of the truck, I drop it about 6 inches or so. It's easier to get in and out of the vehicle. From there, as soon as I sat down, I began to realize this is a very minimalistic design. There was no stalks on the yoke steering wheel. There was no instrumentation to see other than a screen, a little bit smaller than the Tesla Model S, kind of like the Model 3. And the windshield was the biggest windshield I've ever seen. In fact, there was what looked like a 4-foot windshield wiper on the outside of that.
Oh, very easily the biggest windshield wiper I've ever seen before.
And then the roof was all glass as well. Then you had a tonneau cover in the back. But anyway, starting it up, there's a slider on the screen now to go into drive and reverse. And once you start to move in the vehicle, you begin to realize that it's an extremely heavy vehicle. It just felt like I was driving a military vehicle or one of our construction vehicles, like that 60-foot aerial lift with the gigantic tires.
Sure, sure.
You realize that you had a lot of girth and weight. But as soon as I hit the street, I began to realize that the responsiveness of this vehicle is inconsistent with its look and feel and weight. It drove like a supercar, instant torque, instant pickup, and tracked perfectly. It was like driving a Cadillac or a Mercedes, smooth as glass. But now I realize going down Deer Valley Road, I had to make a U-turn to come back to our service center. And I was concerned because even with a Tesla Roadster doing a standard U-turn at that location kind of meant you had to swing out a bit because you wouldn't quite make it. Well, this has steer-by-wire. And both the rear wheels and front wheels actually turn. So I wasn't sure how it was going to handle this U-turn, and I waited until traffic cleared, no oncoming. So in case I blocked the intersection, I had enough time to make my U-turn.
Right.
I started that U-turn expecting to turn that yoke wheel a few times, and I turned it a quarter turn and it stopped. I thought, well, how's this going to work? But as I began to turn, I realized this thing is turning on a dime with a quarter turn on the steer-by-wire wheel. And I made it with plenty of room to spare. So it was quite an experience driving. The only thing that I find that I wasn't used to, well, many things I wasn't used to, but the main thing was the rear view mirror, when you close the tonneau cover, is no longer functional. Now you have to use the screen. And the screen has a nice picture of what's going on behind you. It took me, as I was saying in the earlier podcast, about a year to warm up to the fact to trust the screen rather than the glass mirrors that were on my Model S. Probably a generational thing. So that was one observation. But aside from that, I was never keen on the Cybertruck. I thought, well, you know, it's an unusual looking vehicle. It's not what I expect in a pickup truck. You know, I wanted something that I could use on a construction site, perhaps. After driving this vehicle, I'm sold. And if it wasn't a 2-year wait list, I probably would have the gotta haves and get one.
Wow, that's an impressive endorsement as well from you, because knowing the number of cars you've driven and had over time that are performance cars, I could see you in one of these, Pete.
Yeah.
I could see you.
And of course, it is an attention getter. In fact, somebody was saying they went to one of my old car shows that I used to go to, the exotic car shows, like Cars and Coffee, you know, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, McLarens, my Dodge Viper, you know, and you would see some of the old restored muscle cars. Apparently, somebody drove up to one of those shows last Saturday in one of these, and everybody was clustered around an Enzo Ferrari edition Ferrari, right?
Okay.
Pretty exciting car.
Sure.
The instant that Cybertruck came around the corner, that area basically emptied out, and everybody now clustered around the Cybertruck. And I can just imagine my car buddies, you know, trying to get their head around what just happened. We all used to, you know, assume and expect that the exotics, the Italian exotics especially, would get a lot of attention. But a EV and a Cybertruck, I don't think they were prepared for this. It was a culture shock, I'm sure.
Probably not. You know, and I think eventually the newness will wear off. I remember, you know, back in the day, somebody drove up in a Model S, and that was kind of an event. And nowadays, Model S, you're just like, yeah, whatever.
Right. Now, here's someone chiming in, Tracy Malone. We were talking about the difficulty of getting parts for the Tesla Roadster. The key fob housing, for example, broke and the key broke off. What he's saying is, why not just 3D print the plastics and put the electrical elements or the circuit board inside? That is a great idea, actually.
That would be a really good idea, and very, very possible. It's the time that it takes to put together the 3D print, even for that small of a batch, might be worth it.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest issue, is that you're going to have such a small batch.
And you have two variations now. There's a difference between the key fob for the 1.5 and the 2.0s. So,
okay. So you have those variations as well.
So you have two different prints that you have to do.
Tracy continues and says, if we're just chatting, I'm a Tesla newbie. I have a 2013 Model S 60, which is a 60 kilowatt battery. Battery has a little degradation, but I road trip from Illinois to Toledo and happy to see superchargers at every rest stop along I-80. Wasn't too horrible.
Yeah, good for you. There you go. In a 13, you probably have free supercharging. Hang on to that car.
Yeah, that one's worth hanging on to. And, you know, Tesla allows supercharging to be transferred for certain promotions that they have. So eventually you'll want to replace it. You could put if you wait until usually get the end of the quarter now.
Yeah.
That's their end of the quarter sales thing. Hey, if you buy in the next 2 weeks, we'll let you transfer your supercharging.
Right.
So they're great cars. Even the 2012 and 2013s are just great cars.
Mm-hmm. Tracy also says, since October, I've learned so much about EV and Tesla experience from you guys. Thank you. Well, you're welcome.
You're very
and thanks
welcome.
for joining us. I find that these podcasts that we do, we sometimes look and we say, well, we only had 100 and something, viewers, or I don't know, 800 sometimes, right? And it turns out that so many of the people that contact us watch these things, but don't chime in.
Yeah.
They get a lot of value out of them. In fact, even yesterday, talked to a customer in Louisiana. He says, yeah, when you said that about on the podcast, that reminded me I needed to do this with my Roadster. It's those kinds of responses that you get, but I've never seen them chime in. So it's okay if you don't chime in. Just remember we're out there on YouTube.
Well, and it's our pleasure to be able to help bring this information and value to you as well.
Yep. I have a picture I want to throw up. It's called Eric Part 1. And Eric Robertson is one of the Tesla Roadster owners in Texas. And he is very innovative. He is making carbon fiber parts. For him, it's like a hobby.
Yeah.
So he threw up some pictures on one of the Facebook sites for some fender skirt panels that he made. And we'd like to throw those up and take a look at those and show you what Eric can do. This is what the original panel looked like. And this is a black ABS plastic. And then in the next picture, Eric Part 2, you can see the parts that he removed from the car. There's one on each side in the front fender wells.
Mm-hmm.
And then Eric Part 3 is his carbon fiber version. And there you go. I don't think you would want to do this to gain some lightness, because both the ABS plastic and carbon fiber are probably the same weight.
Probably, but when it comes to strength and durability and aging, ABS is going to grow brittle over time, and it's going to eventually crack and deteriorate.
Exactly.
This carbon fiber won't. That's a beautiful part.
Mm-hmm. In fact, later on in the podcast, we're going to talk about the heater box and the ABS plastic housing that's beginning to crack and become brittle. And in fact, I was going to talk to Eric about making some custom enclosure panels for that heater box. That's definitely another item that's going to need to be replaced at some point. If you look at the final picture, Eric Part 4, and Eric, if you're watching, feel free to chime in. He usually does. If he isn't, then he'll watch afterwards. But here you can see the difference in quality between his product on the right and the original black ABS piece.
It's a beautiful looking product, and yeah, Eric, we encourage you, call us if we don't call you first. We definitely have more stuff that we'd like to work with you on.
So we had one of the Roadster owners chime in, and he was talking about how to preserve his battery in his car, the main ESS battery pack. And he said, is there any advantage or disadvantage to removing the service plug? The service plug, if we can throw up a picture here, guys. Let's see.
I think it's called service plug, right?
Yeah, it should be, but I don't see it.
It's there. It's called service plug.
Okay, let's throw that up. Ah, there it is. It's a smaller one. Yeah, on my screen, I guess I didn't see it. So this is a plug that is on the ESS pack in the rear on the driver's side. It's not greatly accessible. If you notice on the left there, we've got a highlighted view of it. What's in the way there is the trunk strut, rear trunk strut, and somehow you have to get your arm around that to get at the service plug, which then has a lever on the far right where Mark is sitting.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that lever actually normally sits down, and you have to pull it 90 degrees horizontal, as shown there. And it depends on the thickness of your arms. If you've got a skinny teenager, it's probably not an issue. You're not going to be able to do it.
I'd never do it. I've seen that. Yeah, the one time that we looked at that and went to it, I'm like, Victor.
Yeah. And, I can't even do it. I was forced one time. I was leaving a chiropractor and my car wouldn't start, my lightning green 2011 Roadster. And Peter, my son, back at the shop said, well, you're going to have to pull that service plug and reset some things by doing it. It took me about 20 minutes to finally get up under there. And I had, bruises and I had abrasions when I was done.
Oh, yeah. It's not an easy thing to do.
So it's not for the faint of heart to pull it, first of all. But he's saying that the next time I'm away for more than a few days, should I just remove the service plug rather than trust that the power will stay on? Now, what happens when you pull that plug? It puts the ESS pack into a coma, and nothing is drawing any power from that battery pack anymore. If you have it plugged in and you're not charging the car, there are constant life support functions that are drawing from this ESS pack. You have the vehicle management system. You've got security functions. And basically everything in the low voltage system, the 12-volt system,
right,
is still somewhat drawing from this pack. So the question was, by going on vacation, would it be a great, time to pull that service plug to put that into a coma? Here's the reason that we recommend that these plugs do not get pulled unless absolutely necessary. And what I mean by that is your car's bricked and you've got to stop any further damage to the pack. These plugs, these orange plugs, are brittle and old. 20% of them break the handle when removing it. And we know this well because one of the first things we have people do is remove that service plug if their Roadster is bricked. We then have to repair them. And that's also not easy to do because you have to rebuild the portion that holds the handle. Replacement for this plug is, again, virtually non-existent. Back in the day, they were using this type of a disconnect on the Mercedes EV smart car. And I believe even the RAV4 was using this.
Okay.
But we've been trying to source these for years, including Tesla coming to us to help source these, and we have not been able to find a source for these. Once in a while, you'll see somebody pop up that has some used ones for sale, or a used one. And they're not cheap, by the way. It's $185 if you can find one new, and probably more than that if you find one used and they're none available new.
And the thing about these service plugs I'm thinking is, there's probably some sort, it's not just a plastic plug with a wire coming through from one end to the other, is it? Or
no, this is it does two functions. The two little round tabs, upper and lower, connect a high amperage, high voltage connection.
Okay.
And that's why it's often hard to pull out because it's been buried in there for years.
Right.
The second part is the handle, which actuates an interlock switch, a little micro switch. And if that handle isn't down, then the interlock is open or, showing that the circuit hasn't been completed.
Yeah, so it's not like you can take a 6-gauge wire, strip it out, and put ends on it, and then and 3D print something around it, because something like the interlock switch is going to prevent that kind of thing from happening.
Right. So what you'd have to do then, if you were 3D printing something, and that's not a bad idea, by the way, because you can close that high voltage connection and then make sure it's insulated because there's 400 volts there.
Right.
But then that little micro switch, and you can see it off to the right there in that picture, there's that little indentation. That's where a portion of the handle goes in to then actuate that little micro switch.
Okay, I see that.
All right, so that is the reason we do not recommend pulling the service plug. Now, when you do pull a service plug is if your Roadster has gotten bricked. And what that means is it hasn't been charged, and it then begins to complain. Initially, it beeps. It says low state of charge. Give me some juice right away. And if you miss that phase, like you're on vacation, or it's in the garage and you're not paying attention, eventually it gets to the point where opening the charge port door no longer allows you to feed any voltage into the charge port door.
Right. It feels that the voltages are too low to be safe to charge it, and so even though there's still voltage in the battery,
Exactly.
it's now bricked.
It has a safety. There's a safety threshold, and it's around 3 volts per brick. And if anything's lower than that, then you can't charge anymore. At that point in time, you want to do a number of things, and we have a newsletter. Is it possible for you guys to bring up a website, guys? The newsletters? And it is called What to Do If Your Roadster Gets Bricked. We might as well go through those steps. It's very important because that's how you save a Roadster. We've got a Facebook post that we did where a Roadster came in bricked from Northern California, San Francisco. And we got to it in time. We got the service plug pulled.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came in, it was a level 1 recovery. And that car actually charges in standard mode, which is not a full charge, to 190 miles.
Amazing.
Which was right around where they were when they were new, even less than that sometimes when they were new, or slightly less.
185 to 188 miles used to be the standard charge, it seemed like. While we're waiting for that Facebook or that website to come up, we have TikTok. DJ Maurice Evans says Cybertruck is garbage.
Wow, that's a strong opinion. Okay. Somebody else, she posted a picture of a blue trash dumpster next to our Cybertruck there, saying that the two were synonymous or something like that. Well, some people don't like the Cybertruck, it looks like.
It's such a polarizing design. I still will tell Pete sometimes, it looks like a Lego brick with 2 triangle bricks on top. And
I know.
And I will say, even seeing it live, it kind of looks like a Lego brick with 2 triangle bricks on top. No disrespect to that car though. It's a really cool looking car overall when you see it live.
You'll just have to drive it the next time one shows up.
I definitely will. Walmart Plus on TikTok also has a comment for us. He says, I just had a designer from Fivver create a model to 3D print a Pontiac G8 hood vent.
Awesome. One of our maintenance people actually created a 3D print version of his Hummer front plastic portion that goes around the headlights. Yeah, Marcus.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Very impressive.
Hey,
there we go. Okay. So this is a very important document that we send out often when somebody has a brick Roadster, and there are a number of steps to follow. If we can start scrolling up. While the car is still alive, or at least not charging, but the screen is lit, the first thing you want to do is put it in tow mode. That's going to make a huge world of difference in transport costs because a Roadster, once it's hard bricked, meaning you no longer have access to the screen, the rear wheels are locked, the parking pall is set, and you can't roll that car anymore. This particular car in San Francisco was in an underground parking space with ceiling restrictions and lots of turns, and it had locked wheels. We were able to get it into tow mode, which then allowed us to push the car out to the transporter, basically, which is usually taller than these underground parking spaces.
That right there saved that customer hundreds of dollars, I'll guarantee you.
Oh, easily, yes, yeah. So tow mode is very important. The second one is pull a log file while it's still alive. This will allow us to determine what the problem is. It'll even narrow it down to which sheet in that ESS pack is having the problem and which brick, or which is the lowest, actually.
Yes.
Or what caused the bricking in the first place. Timelines are established in there. And then if we go down a bit further, the last step, which is the most important step now, is to pull that service plug and stop any further drain on that battery. If you miss that last step, and it happens, sadly enough, and it sits for months, that Roadster will get into a state called hard bricked, which means there is no cost-effective repair. You would then have to change 11 sheets, which in today's market, with sheets being as rare as they are, puts you into the neighborhood of a brand new battery pack replacement.
Right.
So this is a very important step. And if these are followed, this Roadster is 100% recoverable. We prove that almost weekly as they come in.
You know, even the Roadsters that you pull a log file, we do the free log file analysis. Sometimes we come back and say, hey, it looks like you have a resistive cell. Now, we realize that when you have a resistive cell, pulling the service plug doesn't stop the drain on the battery,
right,
because the resistive cell is draining the battery. However, pulling the service plug can dramatically slow down the drain on the battery, because the resistive cell then is the only thing that's draining the battery, and it extends its life even then.
Yeah. What that resistive cell is doing, it's draining one of 99 bricks. And by pulling the service plug, you're removing any phantom drain that is adding to that drain on that brick.
That's correct.
And you have to make sure that, and this is what the log file tells us, and also your own recording of how quickly the mileage is being reduced every time you charge your car. Let me back up a moment. A resistive cell is revealed by every time you charge your Roadster, you're losing some mileage. Instead of charging to that, like that San Francisco car, 190 every time, it's suddenly 185, 176 or whatever, and it continues to decrease.
Right.
The worst one we saw was the one in Florida. It was declining about 12 to 15 miles every time a charge was applied, and we barely had enough time to get it here.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, when it went on to the tow truck, it had about a maximum 30-mile charge, and we knew just because of how it was when it went onto the tow truck that it was going to come off the tow truck bricked.
And it did, yep. And by the way, that Roadster is doing well. It's healthy. It's in Florida. It's recovered. And it was that one resistive cell that we isolated in that car, and she's thoroughly enjoying her car again in Naples, Florida.
Yes.
So that's the story on the service plug. It's not anything that, you can easily get to. It is brittle. It will break 20% of the time as people try to pull it out. And there are better ways or easier ways to make sure that your charge is properly applied, which takes us actually into the next topic. If you can bring up MC120 upgrade. We've had a number of customers that are sending us their yellow charge cables. In fact, these days, we recommend that when a Roadster comes, that the owner puts their yellow charge cable into the trunk, because that GFI plug that's right by my head, there we go, has a lifespan. And 5 years or so is the maximum life that we recommend before replacing this guy. And there are a number of reasons for that. There's a circuit board inside. The circuit board tends to heat up, especially if you have daisy-chained outlets. What that means is when you plug that into an outlet in your home, the Roadster is expecting a home run connection. A dedicated circuit means that that outlet runs all the way back to the breaker panel to a 20-amp circuit breaker without anything else being connected to it. In residential construction, that is not common. That's an anomaly. That costs extra.
Yes.
So code allows them to put up to 6 outlets per 20-amp breaker. It depends on what area of the country you live in. It could be 4, it could be 6. The problem then becomes you don't know who else is using or drawing power off of that 20-amp breaker while you're charging your Roadster.
And if it's in the garage, there are going to be breakers all over the house that run off that same run.
Yeah, or on the other side of the wall. You've got a toaster on or a space heater, or, then you're going to be tripping the breaker. Well, the problem with these GFI plugs, if they start to work on lower voltage, they begin to overheat. So that's one problem. The second one is this isn't a high-quality plug. It's a GFI plug that you can buy at Lowe's basically for under $30. They have screw connections onto stranded wire. Well, when you first tighten that up, it's nice and tight. But then you get what's called metal fatigue. And eventually that becomes loose. And as it becomes loose, you enter resistance into that connection, which translates into heat. As it begins to heat up, then the metal relaxes even further. It's copper, it's soft metal, and it's stranded. So you have multiple conductors, right? That compress. So the way that we replace these plugs we actually solder the connections on the end of the yellow charge cable if you decide to keep the yellow cord that you have. It's a 12-foot cord, which then prevents some of that metal fatigue, and then, of course, replace it every 5 years. But a better option now is upgrading to our 25-foot 10-gauge cord without the GFI plug. The GFI plug was a must-have in order for Tesla to meet code requirements when they were building the Tesla. It's really redundant in most homes because, you have GFI plugs throughout the house, especially in your bathrooms.
Right, and nowadays with the newest NEC electrical codes, you're getting GFI breakers, not even just GFI plugs.
Right. So what we end up doing and recommend is people typically, if the cord is too short, the one on the left, the stock MC120, it's a 12-foot cord. It's only 12-gauge wire, good for 20 amps. Well, by the time you reach out 12 feet, you've got some voltage drop, and you need a full 15 amps in order to charge that Roadster. What people oftentimes do if it's too short, they'll put an extension cord on it. Well, you have to be very careful there. The extension cords you normally buy at Lowe's and Home Depot are going to be 16 gauge, maybe 14 gauge, and rarely even 12 gauge.
Yeah, who's going to buy the extra heavy duty cord from Lowe's and Home Depot? And even those are just 12 gauge.
Right. And then they're typically 50 foot, 100 foot, right?
Yeah.
Way too long a distance, way too big a voltage drop. Fortunately, the Roadster VDS screen will tell you if it detects an extension cord. And the reason it can do that is it can sense the incoming voltage and the amperage and then report that there's not enough there to do a charge.
Sure, that makes sense.
So what we find is that the only acceptable extension cord for the 12-foot stock cable is a 25-foot, no more than that, 10-gauge wire, which is good for 30 amps. And that's what we're showing on that modified cable there. So our recommendation is get that plug changed, send it with the car. And if you want something beefier and longer, 25 feet, we will replace that yellow stock cord with not a 12 gauge, but a 10 gauge wire, which is good for 30 amps, and give you 25 feet. And it just so happens that our vendor for these 25-foot extension cords makes yellow cords. So it still looks stock.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But it's much heavier and much beefier. Any of you interested in getting that modification done, either the plug replacement or repair, or the one on the right, getting your charge cable modified so that you've got 25 feet now with more amperage. It's on our shop page on our website, and both of those options are out there.
And just to reiterate, the GFI really isn't a code requirement for this charging cable. It was mainly a code requirement. Why? Because they thought that they were trying to be extra careful about the fact that this type of car had never been built before, and they didn't know what they didn't know.
Right. It's an EV, and they didn't realize that that the connections do not extend to the car, the grounding connection. And, the concerns are always is, well, what if the car's outside and it's raining and we've got voltage going to the car? The GFI plug would sense a anomaly between ground and neutral.
Sure.
And then trip.
Sure.
But it's way antiquated and it's no longer necessary. And that option on the right is a very popular one. And you can see there's a standard 15 amp plug on the end of that. All right. Question. Stephen Rose, have you heard of any new design changes on the NextGen Roadster? In essence, four-wheel steering? You know, the amount of information available for the new generation Roadster, the second generation Roadster, is very sketchy at this point, and it changes constantly. We just went to a 0 to 60 in under 1 second.
Yeah, in fact, we might want to talk about some of the changes because these came out within the last week.
Mm-hmm.
There is some new information. I haven't heard about whether it's going to have four-wheel steering or not. I haven't heard if they're going to have drive-by-wire or not, or steer-by-wire or not. I wouldn't be surprised if it does have that, although being a sports vehicle, I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't have it too.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some things that the 2.0 Roadster is going to have that have been announced recently. They've got dates finally.
Yeah, they do. The second gen Roadster, first of all, debuted back in November of 2017, but it's still not for sale. The latest statements, however, from the company and Elon indicate that deliveries could begin in 2025, and he touts some impressive, as this article says, bordering on unbelievable statistics for the new model. Let's go through some of those. So here's what they know so far. With production running, let's see, the second gen was, 5 years after the first gen Roadster was no longer in production in 2012, they announced that there would be a second generation Roadster. At that time, Elon claimed that the Roadster would be able to reach 60 miles per hour in 1.9 seconds, and that was a jaw-dropping prediction back then.
I still remember reading and hearing the debates between people who thought the tire makers would not be able to build tires that would do anything other than shred.
Mm-hmm. Right. And back then, 1.9 seconds, there was very little that was in that territory. And then Elon announced the P100D Ludicrous Plaid.
Yeah.
Which now was, what's that, 1 point?
They were 1.99 seconds for that.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, you've got Lucid that came in at 1.89 seconds with their Lucid Air Sapphire.
The Sapphire, right. And then, of course, you have the Rimac Navara, 1.74 seconds, I think.
Yeah.
So while Tesla was deliberating on releasing its second generation Roadster, the market realized there was a new bar to reach, and they ended up creating product that blew away those original specifications.
So what's the new spec now?
Well, here we go. The new spec, I've got it down at the bottom here. It's going to hit 0 to 60 in less than 1 second. And he also said, Elon, we radically increased the design goals of the new Tesla Roadster. And he added, there will never be another car like this, if you could even call it a car.
Yeah. And do you remember seeing a YouTube video, probably October of last year, about 6 months ago? And it was a lab experiment. It was, I believe, over in Europe, in either France or Switzerland. I don't remember which. And it was the fastest electric car in the world. We did a little article on it. Do you remember the 0 to 60 time on that little, it was basically go-kart.
It was a university in Switzerland.
Yes.
And it wasn't a roadworthy car, but it was an experimental EV. And 1.34, something like that?
No, about 0.98 or something like that.
Under a second.
It was under a second.
Wow.
So that tells me, when Elon came out in 2017 and said this, it bordered on unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're using the same description for sub 1 second, but the bar has already been set. It is possible. And since it is possible, I would be astounded, but I wouldn't be completely surprised.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is the amount of G-forces required to go from 0 to 60 in 1 second might be in the territory where certain people might black out.
Yeah, true.
Tires, of course, aren't going to be able to handle that kind of traction or torque. They would shred, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So the rest of the description here for this new Tesla Roadster is that there would be a 200 kilowatt-hour battery pack and 3 electric motors, 1 up front and 2 in the rear. That would give it over 1,000 horsepower. And of course, we're talking about a small car now, because there are other cars that have 1,000 horsepower, but there's weight, girth, size.
Right.
In 2019, Elon said that the sports car would be available with 10 rocket thrusters that would dramatically improve acceleration and top speed, braking, and cornering. Now I'm beginning to picture a Falcon launch where you have thrusters that are going in various directions to guide the car and to steer it, and braking, all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Then he said, maybe they will even allow a Tesla to fly. In 2021, he was saying that the car would hit 0 to 60 in 1.1 seconds. Well, now he's even, he's modified that prediction even further, below a second.
Yeah, and my little handy AI helper here, I just asked the question, what are the G-forces on someone if they go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 1 second?
What does it say?
It says, well, let's see, to go from 0 to 60 miles an hour, they're going to have 26.82 meters per second squared in acceleration. That's about 2.74 Gs. So somebody who
Almost
is
three.
a 150-pound person would experience almost 450 pounds of force on their body.
Amazing.
That's what it would feel like to go from 0 to 60. Sign me up, man. That'd be fun.
There you go. That's the first time I've heard you say that. Yeah, that does sound like fun. On the Joe Rogan podcast in 2021, Musk went into more detail about the flying Roadster now. He thought maybe we could make it hover, but not too high, he said. So maybe it could hover like a meter above ground or something. So if you plummet and you blow out the suspension, but you're not going to die.
Well, okay.
Well, the specs on this new 2025 Roadster are, again, 200 kWh battery pack estimated. That's a lot of battery.
That's a lot of battery.
In a car that size, if you think about it. There have to be some improvements to the architecture of that battery in order to achieve that.
Yeah, that's a lot of battery. Wow.
3 motors, 1,000 horsepower plus, under 1 second estimated price, $200,000, again, estimated.
If Elon even gets close to this,
Yeah.
this will be by far the cheapest supercar ever made.
Yeah, good point.
Because these are supercar specs, 250 miles an hour under sub 1 second. Yeah, you're not going to find that kind of acceleration probably in anything outside of a Rimac Navara, and the Rimac is $2.2 million car.
Yeah.
This would be the poor man's supercar.
Yep. All right, got another image we can throw up here, guys. It's called the celebrity list. We have the Roadster registry on our website, which means that if you have a Roadster and you notify us, we will put that into the registry. And the original reason we created this was years ago, no one was really sure how many Roadsters are left in the world.
Right.
And you often heard language like in rhetoric that, well, what if Tesla no longer supports the Roadster? Well, how many owners are there that are expecting support? No one knew that. So we created the registry, and the owners began to flood us with information, where they are, what kind of Roadster they have, whether it's bricked or not, whether it has a replacement pack. And that is out there, and we're accounting for about 2,000 Roadsters these days. Out of 2412 built, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
So one of the things that's on this registry site, and if you go to our website, there's a little icon that says Roadster Registry, and if you click on that, you'll see where the cars are. You can even search and sort. If you're curious about how many lightning green Roadsters are there, you type in lightning green, and it shows you how many there are and where they are and what parts of the world, how many have large battery packs, the 80 kW versus 53. All of that's available to you. What we don't share is the personal information about the owners, names, phone numbers, addresses, other than the city and the country.
And other than our famous Roadster owners here.
Yes, right. So the famous Roadster owners here were the celebs that at one point owned a Roadster and possibly still do. There was a question mark on Arnold Schwarzenegger for about a year. I could never get the VIN for that car. And a customer called in last week and said, oh, I almost bought Arnold's car. I said, you're kidding. What color? It was black. And I said, do you know the VIN? He says, well, of course. It was VIN 19. So we now know that Arnold Schwarzenegger at one point in time owned VIN 19, and the celeb portion of the registry has been updated.
And now whoever owns VIN 19, they probably know that they got it from Arnold Schwarzenegger anyway, but
if they didn't,
if they
do
didn't know,
now. Yeah.
they just and that car has just gone up in value.
Yes, undoubtedly. So if any of you know of any other celeb cars that are not listed on this chart that we just put up, let us know, and we'll be glad to list that. And again, it's important for Tesla to be fully aware how many first-generation Roadsters are out there and how many customers are counting on them for support. Another bit of good news regarding that very topic, I found out last week that Tesla Corporate actually has begun, again, training on Tesla Roadsters. So there are some Roadster experts within Tesla that are actually taking some of the newer Roadster or newer service center people and providing training courses for them.
That's fantastic.
And what, of course, we're expecting that will happen as they gain expertise at a local service center that may not be on the Roadster accepted list, that will open up additional service centers because now they have people trained.
Right, and we know the Roadster community is so passionate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, an EV owner tends to be very passionate about their car compared to an ICE car owner. And I think it's because, you know, you get some millions of ICE cars sold every year and some hundreds of thousands of EVs sold every year. You're already part of a much smaller community than the general car population.
Yeah.
A Roadster is so much more rare and so much smaller community. And as a result, so much more enthusiastic about their ownership.
Yeah, you know, we see that all the time. Roadster owners typically regard their car as a member of the family. It's kind of like a pet.
Yeah.
And this is one of the problems that Tesla ran into when they initiated their Roadster buyback program, which, by the way, on the surface sounded like, oh my God, why are they doing that? They're killing Roadsters. Well, in order to get parts for the rest of us that have Roadsters out here, that was a good program, and they spent millions buying back Roadsters.
Yeah.
But initially, they didn't tell them why they were buying it. They said, hey, you want to trade up to a Model 3? Look at this. We'll take your Roadster, and we'll give you X amount for it. And the owners assumed that the car was going to live on through someone else and be enjoyed.
Yes.
A few owners were very upset once they found out that, hey, wait a minute, what do you mean you parted out my car?
Yes.
Probably the worst example was VIN 501, which was the first 2.0 Roadster. This particular customer knew what they were going to do with it. And, you know, hindsight being what it is, I should have bought the car. It was in Phoenix. It was a collectible car. But anyway, that was one of the reasons that people were upset. And it shows the amount of dedication to their cars in the Roadster community. So, yeah, you're right. These are not your average Ford and Chevys where you get your new car, you forgot about the old one next, and, you know.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Hey, Niels is joining us today.
Niels, welcome back. We were wondering where you were. Yes.
Glad to have you here, Niels. He says 0 to 60 in 1 second is about the same as a brisk winch start in a glider. He says, I've tried that many times, and it's not bad if the back is well supported.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking, you know, that I like roller coasters. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of these roller coasters that are out there that do the same type of thing. They're instead of the slow start and go up the chain and then just coast down, you're getting more and more of these roller coasters that have a fast start on a flat track, and then they come up and go down and around.
Right.
It's the same type of thing.
Part of the experience, yeah.
It's part of the experience.
So you're pulling some G's as you start off.
Yeah. Niels goes on to say, well, 1 to 2 seconds is normal. It kind of depends on the wind and temperament.
Okay. All right. Wayne Levitt, when Elon said it about flying but not too high. So you enjoyed that, yeah. He says a meter, and that way you might ruin some suspension, but at least you're not going to die, was the exact quote, right? It's something that he would have said, I think, on Joe Rogan.
That sounds like an Elon quote. Niels has come back and said as well, but really fast acceleration gets old pretty quickly. What do you think on that one?
Well, I still enjoy it. But I do have a customer that I talked to last week. He's a Roadster customer, now has 2 of them, by the way. And he was saying, you know, I got the Plaid, and I kind of regret getting it now. Yeah, at first it was fun, doing those hard launches. And he says, I probably do it now 3 or 4 times a year, and it's only when someone gets in the car and wants to experience the plaid launch.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I suppose it would get old for some.
I know that if I try to do that with an EV, any EV is fast.
Yeah.
I try to do that. My wife says, don't you dare do that again. I'll kick you out of the car.
Of course, I'm going to say this correctly now there, Jesse. It changes things if you have a Japanese import sitting next to you at a red light making all kinds of vroom vroom noises. Then you may have to prove your car's worthiness.
Oh, yes.
All right. What else do we have here? So yeah, we talked about the second generation Roadster, and I often wonder how this Roadster podcast is going to evolve as the new Roadster becomes more relevant and is released.
I do too, especially if as being teased, if the announcement of the new Roadster does come out by the end of 2024,
right?
That's going to change our podcast, I think, at least a little bit.
Yep. Let me see if I can find that heater box, and it looks like I don't have that. All right, so we'll save that for next one then. Jesse, if you can pop up a picture called Service Cart. In a shop like ours where we work on Roadsters, you can't go on Amazon and buy certain types of custom tools. We end up having to make a lot of the products. And I'm always proud when we repurpose something. This is a cart that the guys asked for, and the goal was to get the tires and wheels that are taken off a Roadster on a lift that is getting suspension work, brake work, where you have to take off everything, into something other than the floor around the car, or walk it all the way over to the tire rack and stack them and label them. So we disassemble critical power equipment. We refurbish it, basically. And not all of the equipment that we refurbish, uninterruptible power systems, lighting inverters, equipment like that, usually come with battery cabinets. These grates are actually shelves inside the large battery cabinets. And some of these cabinets will hold up to like 80 or 120 12-volt type batteries, comparable to what's in your ICE car.
Sure.
Fairly heavy, even larger than that. So you need a really substantial structure in order to hold that 5,000 to 8,000 pounds of weight. Well, these shelves fill that purpose, and rather than scrap them, we collect these. When we scrap any battery cabinets, we also salvage the wheels. Those wheels you see down there are good for 5,000 pounds apiece. And they have to be, because in a data center, if you have a large cabinet like this, that you need to move around, it's important. So what we did was we welded up some of these shelves into a nice little cart, and then put an 1/8-inch aluminum top on that, with the ability to hold tires and also serve as a work surface for the guys when they're working around the cars. And they love these things, so we're going to be building more of them. Again, repurposed, and it has a very functional purpose in our service center. What we've been doing is sharing some of our best practices in our Roadster Service Center on this podcast, so that anyone replicating an EV shop can get some ideas. And as we suspected, people all over the world are replicating EV repair shops. And much of the equipment is similar to or identical to ICE shops, the 2-post lifts, for example, tire machines, balancers, that sort of thing. But then there is quite a bit of equipment that is custom. In one of the podcasts we did, we talked about our charging systems, the custom chargers for the Tesla Roadster, for example, the load banks that we end up building. All right. Have another item here. And Jesse, if you guys can bring up Born-1. And we usually do this on the anniversary date, which is February 17th. But we missed it a couple of weeks ago, so I'm doing it now. There was a noteworthy Tesla Roadster tragedy that occurred February 17th, 2010. It was a small plane crash in Palo Alto, California, and it resulted in the death of 3 key Tesla employees. They were engineers that were involved in the Tesla Roadster project and transitioning to the not yet released Model S. In fact, the men were headed to Los Angeles suburb of Hawthorne, where the aerospace venture SpaceX is based, and much of the design and engineering work for the Model S sedan was being done there at that time as well. Well, the pilot, Doug Bourne, who is a Roadster electrical engineer, along with fellow engineers Andrew Ingram and Brian Finn, perished when Bourne's Cessna 310 crashed in a residential neighborhood shortly after leaving Palo Alto, California airport. The type of work that these guys were doing, especially Mr. Bourne, was pretty advanced with the Tesla Roadster, and it was quite a loss to Tesla at the time because there was a lot of intellectual property that was eliminated with this tragedy. There's something interesting for you that you can review if you have a 2.0 Roadster. There's a section of code in the Tesla Roadster firmware 2.0 that can be accessed by setting the parking brake, pressing the I button in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, your VDS screen, and then move to screen 2, and then pressing the memorial button, which is available on that screen in 2.0 and later Roadsters. And what will pop up, if we can bring up image Bourne-3, Jesse, is a firmware-generated screen that gives tribute to these three engineers that were heavily involved in the Roadster project at that time. There we go. So again, we usually do this every year. If you want to see more information, this is also in our newsletter section of our website. And it's called the 3 Perished Engineers or something like that out on that newsletter section. So for those of you that haven't tried this yet, try that on your 2.0 Roadster. Niels is chiming in, talking about the new Tesla Roadster, 2nd generation. He says, what will power the thrusters? You know, that's the burning question. We don't know. Are they going to use liquid nitrogen, liquid oxygen? Is it going to be compressed air? Is it,
Yeah, I don't know. It's...
I hope it's a bolt of lightning, like
a bolt of lightning. Or Jesse has Tesla perfected fusion energy. Who knows? Well, we're going to find out, though, I'm pretty sure.
Dean Bortz has also joined us and said, I have a Model 3 Performance, and the wife gets upset when I get to the accelerator just a little. I can't even imagine what 0 to 60 in 1 second would feel like. I think it would make me woozy.
Yeah. And that's fairly accurate. Sunday mornings, I used to take my P90D Ludicrous to come up here.
Yeah.
And of course, at 6 in the morning or 6:30, there's no traffic in my neighborhood on one of the main streets there. So I usually stepped on it. And if I didn't have any breakfast, there was a bit of queasiness from that launch. It was a hard launch.
It is. I've done a couple in a Ludicrous, and it's pretty intense.
Wayne Levitt says, I taught my dog to lay down when I say cops. This has become handy now in my Model S85D.
Yeah, he says, now when I say cops, my dog lays down, and then I can plant it without pinning him to the back seat.
There you go.
I remember doing one launch in a Tesla. It's in a Model S. My daughter and I were both in there, and she had just placed her empty soda can on the center console. I didn't realize it, and I launched it. And we look back, and you have little flecks of soda in the pop can sitting all the way in the back.
In the back, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. All right, we've got some more images. Jesse, Shocks -1 through 3. We'll take them one at a time. When before we do these podcasts, I usually walk through the service center and I say, what kinds of things are you guys finding this week in the Tesla Roadsters? And timing was good because this morning they showed me some shocks. And these are the rear shocks out of a Tesla Roadster. What you're seeing there is oil. And that oil, of course, there is no oil in the Tesla Roadster, and
Right.
the gearbox is pretty well sealed. So these came out of the shocks. The next picture, Shocks-2, will show you where the oil came from. And there you can see the top portion of that shock, and that seal is leaking pretty badly there. And then the final picture is Shocks-3. On that same car, they showed one of the bushings actually beginning to extract itself from the control arm. The bottom line here is these cars are old enough now and usually high mileage enough where they all benefit from a suspension upgrade. And that includes all of the rubber parts. The rubber parts are the rubber. They get brittle, they get old, they crack,
Yep.
they compress, and they lose their elasticity. By replacing with the newer urethane versions, you can actually add some life to these types of components. But there are very few Roadsters that we get in these days that would not benefit from a suspension upgrade, and that includes shocks, bushings, control arms, the linkages, and yeah. So this is an example of the types of things we run into. The way you can tell you need that is, while you're driving down the street, it drives like a dump truck. And when you hit even minor potholes, you hear a clunking noise or it pounds pretty hard. The steering isn't what it's used to be. It will pull to the right or to the left. It could be alignment. It could also be suspension. And but anyway, any Roadsters that come into our service center, we resolve the immediate reasons they came in, and then we do a deep dive into the car, and we give you a list of pictures and recommendations based on what we're finding. But shocks and suspension is definitely one of them. You know, we even have customers that go as far as powder coating their suspension parts. And there's one being reassembled right now. It's a sterling silver Roadster. I was standing by actually Mike's area the other day,
yeah.
and I look over at our great performance brakes, which make it look much better, and I look behind it, and here is this brand new looking linkages, control arms, sway bar. You know, it was it definitely looked like a improvement, even better than what the car originally had.
Well, sure, and taking the investment to get the powder coating done just helps to ensure that that car is going to last that much longer.
Well, especially in the Four Seasons area where, you know, rust is and salt on the roads will just deteriorate those components badly.
And it will not do that with the powder coating nearly as badly as it will for just a plating or something like that.
All right. We're wrapping up here. We've got a statistics for you. Did you know how many Teslas have been sold from its existence in 2008 to today? Anybody want to take a guess? How many total Teslas are there out there on the planet now since 2008?
2.7 million.
About half.
Yeah.
In fact, exactly half. It's 5,460,832 vehicles. And that was as of 2 weeks ago, so it's probably more. Because what are they building, 1,000 per week in Berlin alone?
Oh, no, more than that. They're building like 6,000
per
a week.
Yes, right, per week.
It's
per day.
up to 1,000 a day, or almost 1,000 a day now that they're doing.
That's remarkable.
And, you know, they... I have to admit, I still think that one of the more remarkable things, Tesla is big and massive, and it's not the biggest EV car company in the world anymore.
Right. Yep.
You know, the fourth quarter of 2023, I see here that Tesla sold 484,000 vehicles, or delivered 484,000 vehicles, and BYD did more. And I'm thinking, wow, dang.
Those of you interested, by the way, in BYD's history, we will be doing a spotlight on various car companies. BYD is next in line. But we did one on I can't say it, Wang Chuanfu, and who is the chairman of BYD. It's out on our YouTube channel. And there's some interesting history there. Some things that might surprise you, and I'll just leave you with that. It's a quick view. It's probably about 3 minutes or so, maybe 5, and it gives you the complete history about Wang's background and how this company came to be the largest EV manufacturer in the world.
Yeah, they're good, easy watch, and a lot of these, I won't say all of them, but a lot of these are now what I would call authorized. We've talked to, for example, RJ Scaringe from Rivian, and he gladly made modifications to what we had proposed as a script, and said, "Go ahead, run with this," and so we were able to do so.
Yeah, getting cooperation from the people that we're doing these short bios on is always handy and flattering because they're interested in making sure that the record gets recorded correctly.
So we appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I think we're wrapping up, are we?
Yeah, well, here's a did you know? Did you know that California has the highest number of Tesla cars on the roads?
I would have expected that here in the States, but I did not know that worldwide.
And if California were its own country, it would rank as 4th in the world for electric vehicle sales.
That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I would have thought because we've talked about places like Norway that are 80% EVs.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have thought, well, of course, Norway has more Teslas than California, but I guess not.
Here's a sobering statistic. Tesla, now catch this, Tesla was the fastest growing car manufacturer in Europe last year with 57% growth. Now, it wasn't the fastest growing EV manufacturer. It was the fastest growing car manufacturer in Europe.
Wow.
And we've got companies there that have been there for decades.
Well, and in some cases, hundreds of well over 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
You think of the Daimler and Mercedes, and wow.
Right. All right. I think you're right. I think we need to wrap. We appreciate all of you joining us for this Tesla Roadster podcast. We find a lot of the traction we get is after the podcast because we do these in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
So again, if you're watching this after a live podcast, we enjoy having you review our YouTube channel. And if there's any content that you would like us to focus on, send an email to ev@gruber.com, and we will accommodate you.
Now, with the time change coming up on March 10th, we will still be at Mountain Time, but you're going to see, if you're not in Arizona, you're probably going to see our podcast time change by just a little bit. We've been on the same time as Denver, Colorado, and all those Mountain Time things. Starting on the 10th, when the U.S. goes to daylight saving time, if you're in the United States, we're going to be on California time. Mm-hmm. So we won't change. We'll still be here. Other than that, look forward to seeing you.
See you next week. Thank you.